Talking about the Russian-Ukrainian war, the most mentioned name in recent days is Bakhmut, the place that witnessed the longest and bloodiest battle in the Russian special military campaign. According to Sky News, Ukraine on March 28 revealed the goal of making its army decisive in a life-and-death battle at this fortress. Kyiv has this morning shared details of its strategy for the eastern city of Bakhmut, saying it aims to exhaust Russian troops in the contested region. The city, in the Donetsk region, has faced months of fierce fighting, with Russian troops going street to street and Ukrainian fighters pushing back. General Alexander Syrsky, Ukraine's top military commander, said in a clip posted today that Kyiv will continue to inflict heavy losses on Russian forces. Moscow sees capturing Bakhmut as vital to its efforts to establish complete control over the Donbas industrial region in eastern Ukraine. As of today, our main task is to wear down the overwhelming forces of the enemy and inflict heavy losses on them, Mr. Syrsky said. It will create the necessary conditions to help liberate Ukrainian land and speed up our victory. Fighters from the Wagner group of mercenaries have likely been deployed to reinforce Russian efforts around the eastern town of Avdiivka, a US-based think tank has reported. It comes after the British Defence Ministry reported today that marginal progress around Avdiivka has come at the cost of heavy losses in armored vehicles for Moscow. The Institute for the Study of War cited the Ukrainian Tavrius Defense Forces as saying that Ukrainian intelligence forecasts that Wagner may appear in the Avdiivka direction. It added that obituaries of Wagner fighters are also noting deaths in Avdiivka. A Russian VK user posted an obituary on March 26 announcing the death of Wagner Group fighter Yevgeny Malgatin in Avdiivka on March 20, the ISW said. Malgatin appears to have been a seasoned fighter, and likely represents the higher caliber of fighter that comprises Wagner's Special Operations Forces. While Wagner has heavily committed a majority convict-based force to operations near Bakhmut, there is likely a contingent of higher quality operators at various locations in Ukraine. Possible drone attacks against key energy infrastructure are a serious threat to Russia's energy security, Energy Minister Nikolai Shulginov said on Tuesday. Shulginov did not mention Ukraine by name, but Russia says it has foiled a number of attempted Ukrainian drone attacks in recent months. Ukraine has not publicly acknowledged launching attacks against targets inside Russia, but senior officials in Kyiv have on occasion appeared to welcome the news of successful drone attacks on Russian soil. The key threat now is acts of illegal interference through the use of unmanned aerial vehicles, UAVs, Shulginov said during a roundtable discussion where he addressed the security of Russia's energy facilities. He said he was cooperating with Russia's Defense Ministry and FSB security service on the issue. Russia has previously reported drone attacks in several towns and cities, some of them hundreds of miles, from its border with Ukraine. On Sunday, Russia's Defense Ministry said it had halted a UAV attack in a town 220 kilometers, 140 miles south of Moscow, bringing down the drone over residential houses in the town of Kiryevsk. Russia accused Ukraine of mounting drone attacks on air bases deep inside Russian territory in December, including the main base for strategic bomber planes near the city of Saratov, after flying hundreds of kilometers through Russian airspace. Russia itself has launched waves of missile and drone strikes against Ukraine's energy infrastructure over the last 6 months of the conflict, often knocking out power for millions of civilians across Ukraine. Ukrainian troops may stage provocations during the visit of Director General of the International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA, Rafael Grossi to the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, Vladimir Rogov, chairman of the We Are Together with Russia movement told TASS. "We are constantly anticipating provocations," said Boris Rogov. During Rafael Grossi's first visit, there were major bombardments. Then there were other attacks as well. There is no basis to exclude the possibility that the Ukrainian authorities will leave this visit of Grossi alone. He said that the Ukrainian side will pick up fire and leave people's hands, blaming Russia for carrying out those provocative actions. Grossi's second visit to the Zaporizhzhia nuclear facility is scheduled for March 29. He will check the security level of the nuclear power plant and stress the need to protect the facility. Also during this visit, IAEA inspectors will be rotated. His first visit in September 2022 resulted in an agreement on the permanent presence of IAEA experts at the facility. The Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, Europe's largest facility, has been under Russian control since February 28. Zaporizhzhia region, along with 3 other former Ukrainian territories. Kherson region, self-proclaimed People's Republic of Donetsk and Lugansk annexed Russia last October after holding a referendum. However, Ukraine stated that it does not recognize this result. Belarus has no choice but to take retaliatory measures to strengthen its security amid the military buildup in NATO neighboring countries, the Belarusian Foreign Ministry's press service told TASS on Tuesday. Unilateral coercive measures in politics and economics are coupled with the growing military potential of neighboring NATO countries right on our borders. Taking into consideration the above-mentioned circumstances and all the resulting legitimate concerns in the national security sphere, Belarus is forced to take retaliatory measures to strengthen its security and defense, the Foreign Ministry said in reply to a question about other countries' exaggerated reaction to reports about the prospects of deploying Russian tactical nuclear weapons on the territory of the country. The diplomats pointed out that they considered the West's actions as direct and blatant interference in the domestic affairs of a sovereign state aimed at changing the geopolitical course or changing the political system of Belarus. The Foreign Ministry underscored that this directly contradicts the commitments made by some signatories of the Budapest Memorandum on Security Assurances in connection with Belarus joining the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons. Russian President Vladimir Putin announced on March 25 that, at Minsk's request, Moscow would deploy its tactical nuclear weapons in Belarus, similar to what the United States had been doing for some time on the territories of its allies. Russia has already handed over the nuclear-capable Iskander missile system to Belarus. According to the Russian leader, a special storage facility for tactical nukes will be built in Belarus by July 1. The agreement between Moscow and Minsk to deploy tactical nuclear weapons in Belarus is a response to the irresponsible policy of London, which is going to provide depleted uranium ammunition to Kyiv, Thierry Mariani, a member of the European Parliament from France, told TASS on Monday. Notably, he also revealed about NATO activities near the Russian border. The UK's decision to provide depleted uranium shells to Kyiv opens a new stage of escalation, he said in an interview. I consider the agreements between Moscow and Minsk on the deployment of tactical nuclear weapons in Belarus a reaction to this irresponsible decision by London. The French lawmaker noted that shells with depleted uranium are more destructive than conventional munitions. He also said that NATO forces have long deployed nuclear weapons near the borders of Russia. I am concerned about the desire for escalation on the part of some NATO countries, the lawmaker said. According to Mariani, at least several countries of the alliance constantly add fuel to the fire. This is primarily the UK and Poland, as well as the Baltic countries, he said. He pointed to a recent statement by the Polish ambassador to France that Warsaw would enter the Ukrainian conflict in the event of Kyiv's defeat. This would provoke the participation of some other countries of the alliance, Mariani said. The UK also seeks to contribute to the escalation, which is in line with the traditions of its foreign policy. For 4 centuries, London has been trying to split the European continent and has always supported European territorial conflicts, the lawmaker said. German Development Minister Svenja Schulze launched an initiative on Monday to rebuild Ukraine, even as the conflict continues in the Eastern European country. Ukraine's reconstruction begins now. Governments alone will not be able to shoulder such a huge task. Entire societies are needed. In Germany, we see a lot of interest in contributing to Ukraine's reconstruction, she said. The Ukrainian Reconstruction Platform will bring together communities, companies, and individuals in Germany and Ukraine, Schulze added. Germany will spend €25 million, $27 million, on strengthening cross-border partnerships. Last fall, Kyiv estimated the post-conflict reconstruction of the country at around $750 billion, while the European Commission estimated the damage caused by Russia's military operation at €600 billion. The sheer size and scope of the drill is eyebrow-raising for Denmark, which for decades since the end of the Cold War has been slimming down its military and devoting itself to assisting overseas missions such as in Iraq and Afghanistan. Thus this massive exercise is seen as a return to a state of preparedness for large-scale warfighting. The largest artillery drill on Danish soil since the Cold War has started in Oksbol on Jutland Peninsula with more than 500 soldiers from 8 different countries. The soldiers will spend the 4-day drill practicing firing rockets, grenades, and mortars and will be accompanied by F-16 fighter jets in the air, warships in the water, and military vehicles in the countryside. The formal goal of the drill is to strengthen military cooperation between NATO member states. Across the participating NATO countries, we must show that we can coordinate the technology and soldier standards so that we can shoot with each other's guns, planes, and ships and hit precisely what we need to, Danish Lieutenant Colonel Kenneth Reichage said in a statement. Reichage described NATO's ability to fight together as absolutely crucial for the alliance in the broadest sense. And at the soldier level, being able to communicate on the right radio and digital communication platforms is absolutely essential. And these exercises are crucial for us to maintain that ability, Reichage said. Although the drill has been planned for a long time, it has become even more relevant amid the ongoing conflict in Ukraine, which many pundits, including Danish radio's military analyst Mads Korsager Nielsen, has described as an artillery war. This means that it has once again become really important to be able to shoot a lot, quickly and accurately. So hence the artillery, Korsager Nielsen said. The exercise is highly unusual for Denmark in its scale. For decades since the end of the Cold War, the Nordic country, along with its neighbors and European peers, has been slimming down its military, devoting itself to assisting roles in overseas missions such as in Iraq and Afghanistan. According to Korsager Nielsen, this era is now over, with the drill signifying Denmark's, and by extension, NATO's, readiness to fight a war on a large scale. Therefore, more large-scale drills such as this in Oksbøl are to be expected in the future. Earlier this year, Denmark and the US were reported to be negotiating a new defense cooperation agreement, which was confirmed by Danish Foreign Minister Lars Løkke Rasmussen, who added that the agreement should create the possibility of a permanent US presence. The enhanced cooperation with the US comes as the Danish armed forces suffer an increasing diminution in personnel, with none of the regiments able to reach full strength. The shortages undermine both Denmark's own defense and its commitment to NATO missions. For instance, there will be no replacement team of Danish soldiers in lieu of the current one hosted in the Baltics this spring. Danish state coffers and military preparedness have been undermined further by Copenhagen's commitment to support Kyiv in the Ukrainian conflict with arms, funds, and training. New Zealand's Foreign Minister Nanaia Mahuta said on Tuesday she had encouraged China to support and strengthen Pacific regional institutions and uphold a 22-year-old agreement that sees Pacific countries look after their own security needs. After returning from Beijing, Mahuta told reporters she had encouraged China to support regional Pacific architecture such as the Pacific Islands Forum, the Forum Fisheries Agency, and the Baikdoa Agreement. The Baikdoa Agreement was signed in 2000 and was a declaration by Pacific leaders for coordinating responses to regional crises such as security issues. Again, they registered our view, and it was very much acknowledged that New Zealand has a strong interest in the resilience of the Pacific on all levels, Mahuta said. New Zealand's tone on security amid China's growing presence in the South Pacific toughened in the past year after China and the Solomon Islands struck a security pact. New Zealand has consistently expressed concerns about the potential militarization of the Pacific with China's military buildup in the South China Sea. Mahuta met with China's top diplomat, Wang Yi, after he returned from a visit to Russia with President Xi Jinping. New Zealand Defence Minister Andrew Little said that the country is interested in cooperating with AUKUS, a tripartite security treaty including the US, Australia and the UK, in non-nuclear aspects. Sputnik reported on March 28, New Zealand Defence Minister Little said, "We are exploring and proposing opportunities to discuss further with AUKUS about the possibility of cooperation in a number of areas." According to Little, the aspects Wellington focus on are related to the strategic technology sharing goal, related to areas such as quantum computing and cybersecurity. New Zealand's territorial waters, land and airspace have become nuclear-free zones, under the New Zealand Non-Nuclear, Disarmament and Arms Control Act 1987. According to Little, any New Zealand cooperation with AUKUS is without prejudice to the country's legal obligations and ethical commitments under the aforementioned Non-Nuclear Act. AUKUS members may be interested in technologies necessary to protect national security, which may include domain awareness, surveillance technology and radio technology, the minister emphasized. Meanwhile, on March 28, when asked about the plan to cooperate with AUKUS, New Zealand Prime Minister Chris Hipkins said, "At this moment, New Zealand is not a member of AUKUS and we are never a member of AUKUS. Is now part of an agreement to build nuclear submarines." Regarding strategic technology sharing agreements, the leader said that Wellington has not made a final decision yet. China's President Xi Jinping spoke by phone with Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman Al Saud, discussing a wide range of subjects including supporting follow-up talks between Saudi Arabia and Iran, state media CCTV reported on Tuesday. She recently helped broker a surprise deal between Iran and Saudi Arabia, Middle East rivals, earlier this month to restore diplomatic ties, in a display of China's growing influence in the region which is being warily watched by the United States. Prince Mohammed, who is also the kingdom's prime minister, voiced appreciation for China's initiative to support efforts to develop good neighborliness between Sunni Muslim Saudi Arabia and Shiite Iran, Saudi state news agency SPA said. The two leaders stressed the importance of strategic ties between Saudi Arabia, the world's top oil exporter, and economic powerhouse China, a main trade partner of Gulf states, it added. She said the two countries will firmly support each other on issues involving their respective core interests, and make more contributions to promote peace, stability, and development in the Middle East, state media reported. Earlier this week, oil giant Saudi Aramco raised its multi-billion-dollar investment in China with two deals that are the biggest to be announced since she visited the kingdom in December, where he attended a summit with Gulf Arab leaders. Saudi Arabia and other Gulf states have voiced concern about perceived disengagement by main security guarantor the United States from the region and have moved to diversify partners with an eye on national economic and security interests. The foreign ministers of Saudi Arabia and Iran are expected to meet during the ongoing Muslim holy month of Ramadan after Riyadh and Tehran agreed, following talks in Beijing, to revive relations after years of hostility that had threatened stability in the Gulf and helped fuel conflicts in the Middle East. The United Nations Human Rights Office in Seoul called on North Korea on Tuesday to confirm the fate and whereabouts of people who have been disappeared under its regime, accusing Pyongyang of violating the rights of the victims and their loved ones for decades. In a report on enforced disappearance and abductions by North Korea, the UN Rights Office said North Korea should acknowledge that it has engaged in a state policy of enforced disappearances since 1950 and take immediate steps to end such violations. The report, based on interviews with defectors, former abductees and relatives of victims, details accounts of disappearances, including arbitrary detentions in North Korea and abduction of nationals from South Korea, Japan and other countries. Enforced disappearance is a profound violation of many rights at once, and responsibility lies with the state, UN Human Rights Chief Volker Turk said. Pyongyang has repeatedly rejected accusations of rights abuses and criticized UN investigations on its situation as a U.S.-backed scheme to interfere with its internal affairs. According to the report, many victims of enforced disappearance within North Korea were sent, often for life, to political prison camps or other detention sites. The testimonies from this report demonstrate that entire generations of families have lived with the grief of not knowing the fate of spouses, parents, children and siblings, Turk said. The international community should join efforts to investigate the crimes committed in the reclusive country, the report said, highlighting the urgency of the matter given the advanced age of the victims and their families. South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol said on Tuesday the international community should have better knowledge about North Korea's dire human rights situation and urged officials to work on informing the domestic and international communities of the North's human rights violations. The chief of Myanmar's junta on Monday vowed to crush anti-military resistance forces as it held an annual military parade in the administrative capital of Naypyidaw. Speaking in front of more than 8,000 troops gathered for the 78th Armed Forces Day, Senior General Min Aung Hlaing said the military is trying to achieve full law enforcement and tranquility across the country and promised decisive action against the anti-military terrorist groups to that end. He also called for measures to be taken against the People's Defense Force, the armed wing of the Parallel National Unity Government, founded by former ruling party members and ethnic minority groups. The leader said the military government has put forward a plan to transfer power back to a civilian administration with democratic standards by holding elections, but that serenity and stability are necessary preconditions for implementing it. During the procession, tanks, rockets, and long-range missiles were displayed, as well as thousands of marching troops and modern fighter jets flying in formation. Min Aung Hlaing seized power on February 1, 2021, overthrowing an elected civilian government led by Aung San Suu Kyi and alleging that the November 2020 election that gave her National League for Democracy a landslide victory was fraudulent. Election observers, however, have said the vote was fair. A 28-year-old woman who police said fatally shot 3 children and 3 adults Monday, March 27, at a private school in Nashville, Tennessee had drawn detailed maps of the school, including entry points for the building, and left behind a manifesto that investigators were examining, Nashville Police Chief John Drake said at an evening news briefing. Drake identified the suspect, who was killed by police, as a woman by the name of Audrey Elizabeth Hale, 28, a resident of the Nashville area, and referred to the assailant by female pronouns. But in response to reporters' questions, the chief said, she does identify as transgender. Whether the suspect identified as a man or woman was not made clear. Police said Hale had previously been a student at the school. The Metropolitan Nashville Police Department began receiving calls at 10:13 a.m. of a shooter at the school, and arriving officers reported hearing gunfire coming from the building's second floor, police spokesperson Don Aaron told reporters earlier. The attacker gained entry to the school by firing through one of the doors, the chief said. Rolling Fork, Mississippi has suffered the greatest losses in the region from the devastating tornadoes Friday, partly due to the poor living standards in the majority black community, once again reminding people of the long-standing environmental racism in the United States. 2 days after the storm, which flattened buildings and killed at least 25 people in Mississippi and 1 in Alabama, Rolling Fork was left with ruins all over the town and few houses and trees remaining upright. The community has started to see the return of residents and gradual arrival of relief forces and materials. On Sunday, U.S. President Joe Biden approved a major disaster declaration for Mississippi, unlocking federal aid to assist in the state's recovery efforts. But how long it will take for the Rolling Fork residents to receive effective assistance and put their lives back together remains uncertain. Mississippi experiences about 30 to 100 tornadoes each year, so the devastation from Friday's tornado in Rolling Fork raises a question about environmental racism in regards to what extent the damage results from the preparedness of the town's authorities and residents compared with majority white communities. According to the latest U.S. Census Bureau figures for Rolling Fork, which has a population of roughly 2,000, more than 80% of the residents are black and about 21% live below the poverty line, a rate higher than the state average. Census data also shows that around 30% of Rolling Fork residents live in mobile homes, which are significantly more vulnerable to tornado damage. The Mexican government will not ban the popular video-sharing social media application TikTok, the country's president said on Monday, March 27, even as the United States moves closer to a possible prohibition on the Chinese-owned app due to security concerns. President Andrés Manuel López Obrador vowed complete freedom when asked about the platform during his regular morning news conference after TikTok's chief executive faced a grilling by U.S. lawmakers last week. Some U.S. lawmakers are calling on the government to ban the app, alleging it could be used for sweeping data collection, content censorship, and harm to children's mental health. The Chinese Foreign Ministry said on Monday the United States has not presented any evidence that TikTok presents a threat to national security. Meanwhile, Canada announced last month a ban on the app from government-issued devices, also citing risks to privacy and security. Other countries and entities have also elected to ban TikTok. Aerial footage shot on Monday, March 27, showed rocks and land by Poole Harbor drenched in oil after about 200 barrels of reservoir fluid leaked into the water. Anglo-French oil company Perenco's UK unit said on Sunday, March 26, that a limited oil leak occurred at one of its well sites in Wych Farm in Dorset, southern England. Perenco UK said the spill was being contained and an investigation will be launched. Any spill is an extremely serious matter and a full investigation will be launched to ascertain what happened in Poole Harbor, Perenco UK's Wych Farm General Manager Frank Dye said in a statement. Perenco UK produces about 40,000 barrels of oil equivalent a day, of which about 14,000 barrels is from Wych Farm. Poole Harbor Commissioners, PHC, said it activated an emergency oil spill plan and the pipeline had been halted, with booms placed on either side of the leak. PHC also warned that people should avoid using beaches within Poole Harbor until further details are available. Last year, Perenco UK's parent firm declared force majeure for 150 days following a leak at its Cap Lopez oil terminal in Gabon. A landslide triggered by heavy rains in Ecuador's Andean region killed at least 7 people, with 23 people hurt and almost 50 missing, the country's risk agency said on Monday, March 27, in a revised report on Twitter. Earlier, the agency reported that 16 people had died as a result of the landslide in the city of Alausi, in Ecuador's Chimborazo province. It did not explain the reasons for the revision, but it did say that 32 people were rescued after a large amount of earth swept down on parts of the city of Alausi on Sunday, March 26, night. Its statement on Twitter hiked the number of missing to 46, from 7 in its previous report. In all, 500 people and 163 houses were affected, the agency said. A local resident and relative of people who went missing during the landslide, Luis Angel Gonzalez, held back the tears while saying he lost everything he had. "We are suffering, we are hurt, we have nothing else to do," he said. Rescue workers searched for survivors in the rubble, aided by dogs. In some areas, most houses were completely buried by earth, according to a Reuters witness. According to the mayor of Alausi, Rodrigo Rey, most of the people affected were people that stayed the night despite previous efforts to evacuate them earlier. Heavy rains have destroyed roads, bridges, and other infrastructure across Ecuador. President Guillermo Lasso earlier this month declared a state of emergency in the 14 provinces worst affected by the severe weather and a strong earthquake. Drone video captured on Monday, March 27, the scale of flood devastation in Bolivia after the river Acre burst its banks following torrential rain. The city of Cobija, in Pando Department, was one of the worst-hit areas, with residential streets turned into rivers. Bolivia's Health Minister Jason Auza said on Sunday, March 26, that more than 300 people have been transferred to the 5 shelters that were established in Cobija. Local authorities, relief teams, and the residents themselves helped locals save what belongings they could as they wait out the floods in shelters. Last month, torrential rains and floodwaters displaced more than 5,000 people along several states of the Andean nation. More than 180 Rohingya Muslims landed in Indonesia's Aceh province on Monday, March 27, officials said, the latest among hundreds who have fled by boat from desperate conditions in Myanmar and in camps in Bangladesh. At least 175 Rohingya refugees were found by authorities upon arriving in East Aceh district while 13 others were still unaccounted for, local police Yusuf Hazriati told Reuters. It was not immediately clear how many vessels they were on. Since November last year, Indonesia has registered 918 Rohingya who reached Aceh, its westernmost region, according to the Foreign Ministry, having made the journey south in the Bay of Bengal and the Andaman Sea. That compared to 180 in the whole of 2021. Nearly 1 million Rohingya live in crowded conditions in Bangladesh, among them those who fled a deadly crackdown in 2017 by Myanmar's military, which denies committing crimes against humanity. Air quality in northern Thailand climbed to hazardous levels on Monday, March 27, as a result of seasonal agricultural burning across and in the region. Local media reported that 4,115 hotspots were detected in northern Thailand in the past 24 hours. Parts of Chiang Rai even further north than Chiang Mai on Monday hit an air quality index, AQI, reading of 582, making it 124. 9 times above a recommended limit given by the World Health Organization, WHO. Thailand's Prime Minister Prayuth Chan-o-cha has mobilized the country's relevant agencies to reduce the impact on the Thai public, including enforcing the law to punish perpetrators of forest burning that causes wildfires. In the midst of a prolonged drought that caused crop failures, farmers in the Spanish village of La Espinola held a very unique mass to pray for rain. Because if there is no rain in the next 2 weeks, they will not be able to save the crops. Therefore, people can only rely on the help of the divine. About 250 people performed a special mass and procession to pray to Our Lady of the Spring. She is a mythical virgin related to the rain in this area. Under the sunny sky, devotees carried the statue of Our Lady of the Spring and placed it on a wooden palanquin filled with green tree branches. Bishops and parishioners carried them around the village. This is not magic, it is an act of faith, said Bishop Francesc Conisa. After 3 years of reduced rainfall and high temperatures, Spain has experienced severe dry seasons. The year 2022 has recorded Spain's record drought in decades. If it doesn't rain within 2 weeks, it's very hard to say what might happen, Altariba, the farmer, said after celebrating Massachusetts. The local council described the mass for rain as the last resort to save the situation. The Spanish government has restricted water use and asked farmers to irrigate as sparingly as possible. The last time the villagers of L'Espinola prayed and sang hymns to Our Lady of the Springs in 2008. And the rain came not long after that. In Egypt, archaeologists recently unearthed a number of fragments of the statue of Pharaoh Ramses II at a temple of the sun near the country's capital Cairo. Pharaoh Ramses II was the most powerful and famous king of ancient Egypt, who reigned over 3,000 years ago. The discovery was part of excavations carried out by the Egyptian Council of Antiquities in collaboration with Germany's Leipzig University Museum at an archaeological site near the Heliopolis Cultural Heritage Museum, in the Madaria region of Egypt. Besides, archaeologists also found fragments of statues of Horemheb, Ramses IX and Psamtik II, kings who ruled from 1323 to 1295 BC, 1126 to 1108 BC and 595 to 589 BC, respectively. They also discovered parts of another unidentified royal statue, but features suggest that the statue may be more than 4,000 years old. Mostafa Waziri, Secretary General of the Egyptian Council of Antiquities, praised, "The new discoveries have contributed to helping people today better understand the history of the area." The person added that excavation work is still going on and an official report will be published in the coming months.